It was just a photo of 3 girls. 100 years later, scientists enlarged the image and were astonished. The photograph arrived at Duke University's digital archives in a worn manila envelope, its edges yellowed with age. Professor Sonia Abernathy lifted it carefully from the protective sleeve, her gloved hands trembling slightly. The image showed 3 young black girls standing outside a brick building, their cotton work dresses stained and threadbare. Behind them, tall windows revealed the shadowy interior of what appeared to be a textile mill. The date stamped on the back read, March 1924, Gastonia, North Carolina. Sonia adjusted her glasses and studied the faces. The girls stood in a row, shortest to tallest. The youngest couldn't have been more than 9, her eyes carrying a weariness no child should know. Beside her was an older girl, perhaps 14, with similar features that suggested they were sisters. The 3rd girl, about the same age as the middle one, stood slightly apart, her expression guarded but defiant. Another forgotten story, Sonia murmured in the quiet archive room. The afternoon sun filtered through the window, casting long shadows across her desk. Outside, the campus bustled with students whose lives were worlds apart from those captured in this century-old image. Sonia had devoted her career to recovering lost narratives of the American South, stories of black workers whose histories had been erased. She placed the photograph under the scanner, watching the blue light sweep across it. A digital file would allow her team to preserve the image and uncover details time had obscured. But Sonia knew every photograph held more than visual information. It held a doorway to a story waiting to be told. Her research assistant, Marcus, entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. He was a graduate student from Charlotte, passionate about labor history and social justice. "Is that the new acquisition from Gastonia?" he asked, setting a cup beside her. "Yes. 3 mill workers, children. Look at their hands. Cotton stains, most likely. And their posture. They're exhausted." Marcus leaned closer. "How old do you think the youngest is? 9? 10? Families needed every penny back then. Children worked because they had to." "It's heartbreaking," he added softly. "They should have been in school, playing, being kids." "That's why we do this," Sonia said quietly. "Someone needs to remember them." Neither of them knew that this single photograph would reveal something far more extraordinary than they imagined. Gastonia, North Carolina, 1924. The town throbbed with the rhythm of textile mills. Brick chimneys released grey smoke into the morning sky. Cotton dust shimmered in the air, falling on streets, windows, clothes, and settling inside the lungs of workers who breathed it every day. The Luray Mill dominated the landscape, stretching across several city blocks. It employed over 2,000 workers, many of them children. Owners called it light work, hands small enough to tie broken threads. Pearl Turner walked toward the mill gate with her older sister Ruth, gravel crunching beneath their feet. Pearl was only 9, yet she had already worked there nearly a year. Her hands, once soft, were now marked by calluses and scars. Ruth, 14, had been working since she was 8. "You feeling all right today?" Ruth asked, hearing Pearl's persistent cough. "I'm fine," Pearl whispered. "Just tired." Their neighbor Dorothy joined them. At 13, she looked older than her years, labor having carved lines beneath her eyes. The 3 girls flowed with the crowd entering the mill, men, women, children, families who relied on every cent they earned. Supervisors stood with watches, noting anyone even 1 minute late. Inside, the mill was a cathedral of noise. Hundreds of looms clattered at once, conversations swallowed by the roar. The air was hot and thick with humidity, a condition that kept cotton from snapping, but slowly suffocated the lungs that breathed it. Pearl worked a spinning frame, tying breaks in thin thread as fast as they snapped. One moment of inattention could cost fingers. She felt the usual tightness in her chest, but she pushed through. Stopping meant losing pay, and her family needed every penny. That afternoon, a stranger arrived. Louis Hine, a New York photographer documenting child labor for the National Child Labor Committee. His wooden camera drew suspicious eyes, but his credentials earned him grudging permission. He had photographed child workers in mines, mills, and factories across America, each picture an act of witness. During break, he spotted the 3 girls standing outside, squinting into the bright March sun. He approached gently. "Excuse me, young ladies," he said, removing his hat. "My name is Louis Hine. I'm photographing the lives of working people. Would you allow me to take your picture?" The girls exchanged uncertain glances. It was just a photo of 3 girls. 100 years later, scientists enlarged the image and were amazed. The photograph arrived at Duke University's digital archives in a worn manila envelope, its edges yellowed with age. Professor Sonia Abernathy carefully lifted it from the protective sleeve, her gloved hands trembling slightly. The image showed 3 young black girls standing outside a brick building, their cotton work dresses stained and threadbare. Behind them, tall windows revealed the shadowy interior of what appeared to be a textile mill. The date stamped on the back read, March 1924, Gastonia, North Carolina. Sonia adjusted her glasses and studied the faces. The girls stood in a row, shortest to tallest. The youngest couldn't have been more than 9 years old, her eyes carrying a weariness no child should know. Beside her stood an older girl, perhaps 14, sharing enough of her features to suggest they were all sisters. The third girl, around the same age as the middle one, stood slightly apart, her expression guarded but defiant. "Another forgotten story," Sonia murmured to herself in the quiet archive room. Sunlight filtered through the laboratory windows, casting long shadows across her desk. Outside, Duke's campus buzzed with students hurrying between classes, their lives worlds away from those captured in the century-old image. Sonia had built her career around recovering stories like this, lost narratives of black workers in the American South, erased from history and memory alike. She placed the photograph under a scanner, watching the blue light sweep across the surface. The digital file would preserve details time had worn away, but every photograph was more than an image. It was a doorway, a life waiting to be remembered. Her research assistant, Marcus, entered carrying 2 coffees. He was a graduate student from Charlotte, passionate about labor history and social justice. "Is that the new acquisition from the Gastonia collection?" "Yes, 3 mill workers, all children. Look at their hands. Cotton dust, most likely. And their posture. Exhausted." Marcus leaned closer. "How old is the youngest one? 9? 10? "That was common back then," Sonia replied. "Families needed every penny. It's heartbreaking. These children should have been in school, not breathing cotton for 12 hours a day." "That's why we do this," she said quietly. "Someone must remember them." Neither of them yet knew just how extraordinary this photograph would prove to be. Gastonia, North Carolina, 1924. The town surged with the rhythmic thunder of textile mills. Brick chimneys spat grey smoke into the sky, and the air shimmered with fine cotton dust, settling on clothes, window panes, and, most dangerously, in human lungs. The Luray mill dominated Gastonia, employing over 2,000 workers, many of them children. Owners justified their labor by calling it light work, suited for small fingers to tie broken threads. Pearl Turner walked toward the mill gates with her older sister Ruth, gravel crunching beneath their shoes. Pearl was 9. She'd worked nearly a year. Ruth, 14, had worked since she was 8. Childhood was something they remembered only faintly. "You feeling all right?" Ruth asked. Pearl had developed a dry cough that rattled her chest. "I'm fine. Just tired," she whispered. Their friend Dorothy soon joined them. 13, but worn down to look years older. The three girls walked with the rest of the crowd through the gates, where supervisors watched the clock, ready to fine anyone late. Inside, the mill was a deafening world of clattering looms and heavy humidity designed to keep cotton threads from snapping. With every breath, workers inhaled tiny fibers that clung to their lungs like chalk. Pearl worked at a spinning frame, tying broken threads. One moment of distraction could cost fingers, or worse. Still, she pushed through the chest tightness. Missing work meant no pay, and no pay meant hunger. That afternoon, a stranger arrived, photographer Lewis Hine, documenting child labor for the National Child Labor Committee. He had photographed mines, mills, and factories across the South. Each picture was proof, evidence. During break, Hine spotted the three girls outside the mill and approached them gently. Ruth spoke first. "Why do you want our picture?" "Because your story matters," he said. "People need to see the truth of your lives." Dorothy crossed her arms. "Will we get in trouble?" "No. I won't use your full names without consent. I want the world to know you exist." Pearl studied him. He looked kind. Sad, even. She nodded. Hine positioned them against the brick wall. He told them not to pose, just exist. The image captured exhaustion, dignity, and the quiet courage of survival. "Thank you," he said afterward. "Your courage matters more than you know." Pearl's cough worsened over the following months. Many workers developed what they called cotton lung, dust inhalation that scarred their lungs and slowly suffocated them. Ruth begged their mother to get a doctor, but the mill provided no care, and medical fees cost more than they earned in a week. By 15, Dorothy's lungs failed entirely. Fevered, blue-lipped, gasping, she died that night. The mill didn't stop. Her job was filled the next morning. At the burial, Pearl held Ruth's hand and understood she could be next. 96 years later, 2020. In her Duke lab, Sonia and her team enhanced the photograph using AI-based analysis systems originally designed for medical imaging. The resolution revealed impossible detail: threads in the dresses, pores in the brick, scars on the girls' hands. Sonia ran a facial structure analysis on Pearl, expecting only basic data. Instead, the system flagged unusual genetic markers. She compared it with phenotype databases, then genomic correlation software. The results stunned her. A rare MC1R gene mutation, extraordinary not just for its rarity, but for its implications. Marcus blinked. MC1R, doesn't that usually relate to red hair? Some variants do, but this one has been linked to enhanced tissue repair and cellular regeneration. Sonia stared at the photo, at the small, tired girl with a cough. What had they uncovered? Marcus's eyes widened. "You're saying this little girl might have had a genetic mutation that could have protected her lungs?" "Possibly. The research is still preliminary, but this variant has shown correlation with reduced inflammatory response to particulate matter and improved lung tissue regeneration in exposed individuals." They looked at each other, the implications settling heavily between them. Sonia knew that identifying a genetic marker from a photograph was far from definitive proof. She needed to find out what had happened to Pearl Turner, if that was even her real name. Most of Hines's photographs included minimal documentation, sometimes just a location and date. Names, when recorded at all, were often incomplete or altered to protect children from retaliation. She started with the Gastonia mill records, many of which had been digitized and archived. The Laurie Mill kept employment ledgers, though they were notoriously incomplete and often falsified to hide violations of child labor laws. After days of searching, Marcus found a promising lead. "Look at this," he said, pulling up a scanned ledger page. "March 1924, Laurie Mill, spinning room. There's a P. Turner listed. Age given, is 14. 14? Sonia frowned. That child in the photograph is no more than 9 or 10. Exactly. They routinely lied about ages to avoid fines. If this is our Pearl, her real age would have been around 9, just like we estimated. Sonia traced the entry with her finger. There's an address, 512 Cedar Street, West Gastonia. That would have been in the black section of town. Next, they searched census records and found the Turner family in the 1920 census. Martha Turner, widow, with 6 children listed. Pearl recorded as age 5 in 1920, making her 9 in 1924. A perfect match. But what happened after? Black mill workers often left sparse traces. Many died young from industrial accidents or lung disease, their deaths barely noted. Sonia searched deeper. Death records, marriage licenses, directories. Weeks passed. Pearl Turner seemed to vanish, like so many before her. Then, one evening, Sonia found something unexpected. In a 1964 edition of the Gastonia Gazette, a small obituary, Pearl Turner, age 70, died peacefully at her home on November 3rd, 1964. A long-time resident of Gastonia, survived by 3 children and 8 grandchildren. Sonia stared at the screen, heart racing. Marcus, come look at this. He read over her shoulder. She lived to 70. That's incredible. More than incredible, Sonia whispered. It's virtually impossible. Mill worker mortality data confirmed it. Child workers in spinning rooms rarely reached 35. Most died before 25. Yet Pearl lived to 70, surviving decades longer than expected, which meant something had protected her. Finding Pearl's descendants was difficult. Neighborhoods had been dismantled by urban renewal, families scattered. Sonia contacted the Gastonia Historical Society and local black churches. Weeks passed with no reply. Then a call came from Reverend Lisa Mitchell of Mount Zion Baptist Church. I think I might know who you're looking for, she said. There's a woman in our congregation, Evelyn Washington. Her grandmother was named Pearl. She always wondered how she survived when everyone else died. Sonia and Marcus drove to Gastonia to meet Evelyn, an older woman with sharp eyes and a garden of roses and hydrangeas. Her living room walls were lined with family photos. Reverend Mitchell had told her about the research. Evelyn listened carefully as Sonia showed her the enhanced photograph. I've never seen this picture before, Evelyn whispered. My grandmother rarely talked about the mills. Too painful. Children dying. Friends coughing themselves to death. But she survived, Marcus said. Evelyn nodded, and she never understood why. She'd say, I breathed the same air, worked the same hours, yet I lived. That's my mystery. Sonia leaned forward gently. Mrs. Washington, would you consider a genetic study? We believe Pearl may have carried a rare variant that protected her lungs. Evelyn hesitated, skeptical but curious. Sonia explained the MC1R mutation as carefully as she could. 3 weeks later, results arrived. Evelyn Washington carried the same MC1R variant Sonia had predicted from the photograph. 5 relatives tested positive as well. Dr. James Chen, molecular geneticist at Duke Medical Center, laid the reports across the conference table, barely containing excitement. This is extraordinary, he said. This MC1R variant is extremely rare, less than 0.1% of the population. But what makes it remarkable is its functional effect. Marcus's eyes widened. You're saying this little girl might have had a genetic mutation that could have protected her lungs? Possibly, Sonia replied. The research is still preliminary, but this variant has shown correlation with reduced inflammatory response to particulate matter and improved lung tissue regeneration in exposed individuals. They looked at each other, the implications sinking in. Sonia knew that identifying a genetic marker from a photograph was far from definitive proof. She needed to find out what had happened to Pearl Turner, if that was even her real name. Most of Heinz's photographs included minimal documentation, sometimes just a location and a date. Names, when recorded, were often incomplete or changed to protect the children from retaliation. So she started with the Gastonia Mill records, many of which had been digitized and archived. The Lore Mill had kept employment ledgers, though they were notoriously incomplete, often falsified to hide violations of the minimal child labor laws that existed at the time. Days later, Marcus found a lead. "Look at this," he said, pulling up a scanned ledger page. "March 1924, Lore Mill, spinning room. There's a P. Turner listed. Age given, 14. 14? Sonia frowned. "That child in the photograph is no more than 9 or 10. "Exactly. They routinely lied about ages to avoid fines. If this is our Pearl, her real age would have been around 9, just like we estimated." Sonia traced the entry with her fingertip. "There's an address listed, 512 Cedar Street, West Gastonia." She paused. "That would have been in the black section of town." Next came census records. The 1920 census listed Martha Turner, widow, with 6 children. Pearl was recorded as age 5 in 1920. She would have been 9 in 1924. A perfect match. But then her trail went cold. Mill workers, especially black workers, left few records. Many died young from industrial accidents or lung disease, their deaths barely noted in official documents. Sonia combed through death certificates, marriage licenses, property transfers, nothing. Pearl Turner seemed to vanish after 1924, like so many children swallowed by the mills. Until one night. In a 1964 edition of the Gastonia Gazette, buried in the obituary section, was a small notice. Pearl Turner, age 70, died peacefully at her home on November 3, 1964. A long-time resident of Gastonia, survived by 3 children and 8 grandchildren. Sonia stared at the screen, heart racing. "Marcus, come look." He read over her shoulder. "She lived to 70. That's nearly impossible." Sonia pulled up mortality data. The average life expectancy for child mill workers in the 1920s, especially those in spinning rooms filled with cotton dust, was under 35. Most died before 25. But Pearl lived 4 decades beyond that. She had survived something that almost no one else had. The only explanation was biological. Weeks later, after contacting churches and historical societies, Sonia received a call from Reverend Lisa Mitchell of Mount Zion Baptist Church. "I believe I know who you're looking for," she said. "There's a woman in our congregation, Evelyn Washington. Her grandmother was named Pearl. She speaks of her often, of how she survived the mills when others didn't." Evelyn agreed to meet. She welcomed Sonia and Marcus into her modest brick home, walls lined with framed photographs. She studied the enhanced image of the 3 girls, her eyes filling. "I've never seen this photo. My grandmother rarely spoke of her childhood. It hurt too much. She said she started working at 9. 12-hour shifts. The dust was so thick you could barely see across the room. Children coughed themselves to death, one by one." "But Pearl didn't," Marcus said gently. "No," Evelyn whispered. "She always called it her mystery. Why she lived when her sister Ruth died at 19. Why Dorothy died at 15. Why she survived it all." Sonia explained the genetic theory and asked if Evelyn would consider testing. Nervous but curious, she agreed. 3 weeks later, the results came. Evelyn carried the rare MC1R variant Sonia had predicted, one present in less than 0.1% of the population. 5 other relatives tested positive as well. Dr. James Chen, a geneticist at Duke, joined the research. Explaining it simply, he told them, "The MC1R variant reduces inflammation and increases lung tissue repair. In conditions that destroyed other lungs, Pearl's could heal. Her lungs didn't escape damage entirely, but they recovered in ways others couldn't. She worked a decade in cotton dust, raised children, lived to 70. Not just survival, cellular endurance. Word spread. Their paper was published in the Journal of Medical Genetics. Media outlets contacted them. Conferences requested Evelyn as a speaker. Yet Sonia always emphasized the deeper truth. Pearl's survival was miraculous, only because the conditions were deadly. A child should not need a rare mutation to live. Evelyn became the public voice, the bridge between science and history. She spoke boldly. My grandmother lived, but Ruth didn't. Dorothy didn't. Children died in mills. Lungs turned to scar tissue before adulthood. Pearl wasn't lucky. She was genetically armed for war no child should have fought. Researchers later discovered the variant occurred at slightly higher rates among black textile survivors. Survival passed through bloodlines like a terrible inheritance. The mills had unknowingly created a brutal form of natural selection. To honor them, Sonia, Evelyn, and community leaders established the Pearl Turner Memorial Fund, providing scholarships and funding health disparity research. In 2021, a historical marker was raised outside the former mill. Over 200 people gathered. Evelyn stood beneath the sun, the famous photograph shining in bronze behind her. She spoke. My grandmother survived by chance, but she shouldn't have needed to. No child should. The plaque read Pearl, Ruth, Dorothy, their birth and death years, and thousands of unnamed children whose lungs filled with cotton dust. Sonia stood in the crowd, tears falling. What began as an archival curiosity became a recovered life, a scientific revelation, a moral reckoning with history. That night, returning to Duke, Sonia placed the original photograph into its archival case for preservation. She knew its power lived beyond the paper now, alive in genetics, in databases, in descendants, in policy. The girl who once labored unseen in 1924 now lived in history, in science, in memory. Pearl Turner, once anonymous, had become immortal.